Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hi, and welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. I'm super excited for my guest on today, Kylie McBeath. Thank you so much for coming on. Kylie, tell our listeners about yourself.
Hi there. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to just have this real, authentic, raw conversation with you and acknowledge you for creating a safe space for us all
Thank you.
to journey forward. Such a beautiful mission because being stuck sucks.
Yes, it does.
Gosh, doesn't it? It's like, holy crap, how do I get out of these places that just don't feel good? And that's really, those stuck moments have been my catalyst for my inward journey. It's like, okay, there's something blocking me from moving forward. What is happening? And what type of tools do I need to learn in order to get out of this place? Luckily, awareness has been such a beautiful gift and sometimes a curse. You start to become self-aware and you're like, gosh, I wish I could go back to sleep.
Oh my gosh, you just tapped into something that I have felt for so long. And sometimes ignorance really does seem like bliss if you decide you want to live the surface level life. However, once you're aware, you can't go back from what you're now aware of. So it is like a curse at times and a beautiful gift all wrapped up into one beautifully messy package.
Right. And you can't avoid the pain anymore.
No.
That's the gift of awareness is like, if something's coming up in your body or in your relationship or in your life, work, whatever, it's almost because you have so much awareness now that you can't operate in the same, with the same blinders on. It's like, sorry, you're too awake. Like that's what you signed up for in this life. So you better just dive in and acknowledge and own that, but also let pain be the teacher. That it is.
Do you also feel that gosh, we just jumped right in. I love this kind of conversation. This is fabulous. I wish I could have this kind of talk every single day. It would be so fulfilling. And I would need a break of it too. But don't you feel like sometimes once you have that awareness, you're able to view the pain when it shows up in a different light?
1,000%. And this is, I believe, why I do the work I do. And it probably similar to you is I remember what it felt like to be unconscious. Mm-hmm. And I'm not on the spectrum from unconscious to conscious, but there is, with awareness, there is that newfound perspective of pain. You have a little bit more altitude so you can relate to it from a little further of a distance. Whereas before in my early 20s, and that's really where this whole journey begins. At least that's where I think the main origin story begins. Is I ended up getting married really young, engaged at 21, married by 22, and was living out just this unconscious script that I've been given my whole life. Is like, get married, have the kids, have the house, have the dog. Like,
what's next? What's next? What's next? What's next?
Yeah, it was all this surface level, checking all these boxes in order to find that fulfilling life. And it was like, okay, well, I checked that box, so now I should be happier, or I should be more fulfilled, or I should feel safer or more secure. But why don't I feel like any of these things? And
I think we had a similar life. We're like
amazing. I love that. When I started talking, everyone is like, I had the same experience.
I was with my ex-husband since I was 13 years old.
What?
And I got married at 24. Same thing. Like, I'll be happy when. And while maybe I was happy, I wasn't fulfilled.
Yes. And there's such a, that is a beautiful distinction. Mm-hmm. It really, truly is, because I think sometimes in this dualistic mind that we all have, we try to make it good, bad. And it's like, no, that's not necessarily the truth. It can be both good and not in alignment or not.
Exactly.
That's okay.
Yes.
And that's more of that spiritual dimension, would you say, in this process of being a human?
Well, yeah, and it becomes an existential crisis.
Ding, ding, ding.
Right? So, for me, and I want to hear more about what you were going to say, but for me, deciding, 12 years into my marriage, 2 kids, 2 houses later, with kind of the perfect life to say, yeah, I'm willing to give up the safety and security for the unknown, trusting that will get me into alignment. So whatever unfolds, it will have to be okay because I'll be in alignment with mind, body, spirit, heart, soul, being grounded in, at least I'm doing this consciously.
Let me just take a moment to acknowledge you for having the courage to face that. And because that is crossing that chasm from security and familiarity into the world of unknown and surrendering to something unseen and unknown is brave work, my love.
Thank you. So how did you, from getting married at 22, decide this was not my alignment that I want to be living?
It's fascinating. I don't know if you had this experience. I'm curious now. Now I'm asking questions. Sorry. Is when I got married, a switch flipped for me, and it was so subtle. It was almost like a bigger chunk of who I was or my truth kind of shut down. It was like just like a numbness kind of started, I guess a wider gap in between who I truly was here to be and who I was expressing myself as or representing, or the roles I was now taking on. So now I was obviously a wife, a daughter, a sister-in-law, like all of these different things.
These roles.
All of these roles with all of these expectations. And I started to become internally overwhelmed. And at that point in my life, I had an emotional intelligence of an ant. Like I was not at all aware of my emotional terrain. Like
who is in their early 20s?
I mean, I'm amazed. Some of the younger kids these days actually, luckily with information age that we live in, people have so much more accessibility to information these days.
And tools like that mindfulness and meditation aren't too woo-woo.
Exactly. It's more mainstream. Less around mental and emotional health, which thank the heavens, right? If we're ever going to move forward, we got to really break down some of those walls and this idea of perfectionism and I don't think crazy. It's well, that's not true. Actually, you're just pushing it all into your shadow and numbing it out with drugs, alcohol, sex, and all this. All the other. And listen, I did a lot of that with shopping and externally focusing on other people, caretaking, like all of these other patterns. So I'm not alone in that. I think that's a human spectrum. We all do it, whether it's through spiritual bypassing or drinking alcohol.
That's one of my favorite phrases, spiritual bypassing. Describe that for those who are listening who aren't aware of what spiritual bypass is. I love that phrase.
Yeah, it's such an important one. And it actually smacked me straight in the forehead about 2 years after my divorce. Because after my divorce, I went straight to spirituality. Like it was like the only, and I love this quote that I heard from Thais Sky. She said, the light saved me when I was drowning, but darkness taught me how to swim. And right?
That's beautiful.
It was so powerful because I was like, oh, thank you for the permission to seek the light and whatever spirituality I needed to in that moment, because I needed to just I was drowning. So anything that kept me afloat, I was like, great, let's sign up for that. So spiritual bypassing is utilizing spiritual concepts to avoid pain.
It's like saying you're doing the work, but not actually doing it, but claiming spirituality in lieu of actually deepening in or being open.
Yes. Or all is love and we're all one. Maybe on the deep essence of this whole human experience, but in saying that you might be repressing your own anger, your own boundary, all of these other things that actually require you to engage in conflict of some sort or to stand up for yourself, to have a backbone. So it's it's not just all rainbows and butterflies on this planet, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Right. So, so I'm going to circle back. So right after I got married, I started to really become aware of this internal disconnect. Had no tools to even name it. Had no clue what was happening to me. So of course I just kept to my coping strategies, kept to my strategy of perfectionism, people pleasing, and was just like, okay, well, the more perfect I am, the more I can take care of it. Then I'm going to get these needs met or fulfilled, or I'll be fulfilled.
And then I'll be happy.
and then I'll be happy. And then there's nothing we have to worry about. But what became really clear to me about a year into my marriage is I was having an existential crisis. Like I did not feel like I had a purpose or like purpose or meaning in my life. And I felt this pull, or at least this inner knowing that I was here for a reason. I had no clue what that reason was, but I was like, something isn't sitting right. And so I didn't know how to deal with that.
Did you feel that in your body? Were those thoughts in your head? Because I think sometimes people have a sense of it, but don't even know to even name it as that. And they can equally externalize it as other things not being in alignment or not working out. How did you know that that's what it was? What cues were you starting to pay attention to?
Gosh,
Can you recall?
Hindsight is 2020. And in the moment, I did not. I have my journals, and my journals tell the whole story where it was like, what am I here to do? What am I here to do? Give me any type of answer. And from a somatic perspective, I pretty much lived from neck up, meaning I was severely disconnected from my body and from my power center, or from even being able to acknowledge and name my emotional or somatic experience. Yeah. So I would say that for me, how I would describe this experience from a somatic perspective is being cut off from my body, like disembodied, numb, almost an apathy, like not really fully alive, present, energized. I was kind of, I guess you might be able to describe it as like a depression of the whole system. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I almost feel like it's being muted.
Yes, exactly. And that's just such
or like the volume's turned down and just going through the motions, like right?
Automatic, robotic. The sky is always gray.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, when is this going to all wake up around me?
Yeah. But that was about a year into your marriage, you said.
Yeah, it was about a year into my marriage. And of course, I didn't have any like really any awareness around this internal journey. So you know what we do when we don't know how to solve our internal problems? We make them external problems. So I started to blame my husband for everything. I was like, it's because you do this too much. It's because you're traveling and I'm alone. And I needed him to be there 24/7 in order to fill the void that I had within. Like, and I just could not drop this narrative. Like that was the reason. And obviously in that process of making this internal void an external problem, I ended up pushing that relationship away and destructing my whole marriage, which at that, so how I did that is I actually kissed my boss at a Christmas party. And mind you, this is where the wake up call of all wake up calls for me, because I was a perfectionist. Like my identity rested on perfection, also being so kind, so loving, compassionate, like would never hurt a soul. And that is actually my true self. Yeah. So when my shadow came out and like destructed my whole world in that moment, of course I wanted to be like, yeah, there was alcohol, there was this. Right. Let's be very clear. I knew in that moment making that decision that I was going to destruct my world. But at that time, I did not see another option. I was like, I don't give a shit. I'm dead already. So if this is going to wake me up or catalyze me to take a journey inward or wherever, then I have to take it. And now, of course, looking back on it, and I had a lot of shame and had to do a lot of self-healing around that choice point in my life. Because it did suck and I did feel like a coward and I did feel like all of these things because I was like, I can't believe that was me. But that was the dismantling of the largest ego death that I've ever experienced, because I was like, okay, you better check in with all of these roles. Because that's not you.
And yet I would also venture to say it was you within a context in which you weren't fitting.
Yes.
And in that moment, that felt like I need a way out. I don't know any other way out.
I felt trapped.
Yeah.
And divorce wasn't an option, because people who are perfectionists or who grow up in historically Western, Judeo-Christian boxes that's just not an option. And don't get me wrong. I have so much respect and love for my ex-husband. He was an incredible human being. So it was like, it was just so confusing. So I went after making that decision, I went into what I call an emotional black hole, shame spiral from don't even know where. Could not even function as a human being, lost like 20 pounds in 10 days.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, no, I couldn't eat. I couldn't talk. I actually probably borderline, like when I look back on it and I read about psychological diagnoses, because I'm just fascinated with psychology after that experience, because I was like, I need to understand the mind. Borderline, like it could have expressed itself as schizo, like some of the tendencies of like just erratic.
Yeah.
And it's because I could not integrate the experience in with the identity or in that context of how I find myself.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so
there was a huge disconnect.
Huge disconnect.
Huge.
So luckily I had one of those moments where everything kind of just like angels from the sky came in, and I heard in probably the darkest hour of my life was, you created all this because you were afraid. And it was in that moment that I separated from this small story, where I finally started to see from a bird's eye view the timeline of my whole life. And that's when everything collapsed for me. And what I mean collapse, it collapsed from past, future into the present moment. And I was able to actually sit with what was happening within. And at that moment, I wanted to go clean up my whole life and stay married, of course, and, you know, all of these things. But it was like, hey, there's not a recovery crew large enough to actually fix the demolition that you just created. Yeah. And your path is forward, like you're saying. It's like the journey forward is not to go back into the same box. It's like, okay. And I knew deep down spiritually that there was a bigger purpose and meaning for this moment and for this relationship and for the dissolution of all of it. And that was the one thing that kept me afloat after the divorce, because it rocked everybody in my life, rocked me, rocked my family, rocked my ex's family, him, like, and so it was just like all of these emotions and reverberations.
It's hard in that moment to feel like there will be purpose that comes out of this.
It was the only thing that I could hold on to, though.
It's amazing that you were able to hold on to that. There was no option to hold on to anything else in that moment at the same time. So it's this paradox.
It is. And that's why I tell people all the time, and I feel very blessed for having that awareness, or at least, and I always tell people, if you can choose a thought that feels good or it doesn't feel good, why don't you just choose the one that feels good? And in that moment, the only thing that made me feel good was to give this a purpose outside of all of that shame, all of that pain.
Yeah.
So it catalyzed me. And then I spent 2 years really figuring out who I was, read over 200 books, traveled to, not within the first year, because I was a runner. I'm an avoidant by nature. So I wanted to run away from all of the pain. I'll go travel. And I was like, no, that's not the answer. So I made a commitment to stay still and to feel all the pain I'd been shoveling under the rug for 25 years. And
just to sit with it, literally.
Just to sit with it. And it was painful. And it was the greatest gift I've ever been given. In that pain, I was liberated from so many narratives, from so many intergenerational shackles that I feel now incredibly blessed as I move into 30. Incredibly blessed to have witnessed in my younger 20s, because, oh my gosh.
Because now you get to go live the gifts that you learned.
Yes, and still continue to learn. And that's that's one of the things is I wanted my growth to be over after the divorce. It's so interesting. You go through these big moments and you're like, okay, I've done enough work. Like, I'm good.
I should be good now. Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm like tapped out. I just need to can we go back to checking boxes for fulfillment?
Yes. I have to share. I have one of my favorite artists. His name is Brian Andres. And he has this line of, if any of you guys listening, go on Instagram, go look up Story People by Brian Andres. And he's got these really bizarre drawings and figures of people, but these amazing quotes. And it really speaks to me. And his quotes are so insightful. And in my office, I have one of his in my waiting room, and it says something, I should have it memorized, but it says something to the effect of, I've learned everything, so why won't all these life experiences go away now? And like, isn't that just so true? Like, I thought I've learned my lesson. So can I stop having to learn anymore? Can't I just like live in what I've learned? But yet life keeps giving us more opportunity and more experiences to keep growing and learning. So we're never done. We're never there. We never fully arrive
right
in that one spot to say, okay, I'm good.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of life, isn't it? It is. It's like, it's the paradox of this human experience, is because we would be bored out of our minds if we didn't stop. If we just were like, okay, everything's good. And it's not that it's not good, because it's finding good or finding harmony within every ebb and flow of life, from rock bottom to fully self-express, or moments of joy or grace. It's like, how can I just be here for it all?
Yeah.
And I'm still working on that. Let me like I haven't figured that whole system out. But
so when you got really still, was that a formal spiritual practice in terms of turning to meditation? How did you know what to do with that stillness? Because I think in the face of fear and anxiety and unknown, that stillness can be really daunting and really scary. And how were you guided in what to do in that moment so you didn't keep running or avoiding? Because that takes a lot of courage to sit still.
Yeah, it does. And when you have no other option but to sit still, like that's where it was. Like it was like, there's no other option here, chick. Like if you were going to move through this and out of this, you have to sit still. Like I knew that, because I'm like, I don't ever want to experience this ever again. Or at least if I do experience it, I want to have a little bit more perspective, a little bit more altitude on the whole situation, so that I can navigate it with more ease and grace.
Yeah. I love how you use the word altitude. Like I'm really big into visuals. I think they really help for me. I always teach things, whether I'm teaching mindfulness or meditation, or I'm working with my clients in therapy. I always come from the assumption of, if it helps me understand it better, it'll likely help someone else understand it better, because I know I'm not the only one who needs very clear, simple instruction to get very deep concepts.
Yes.
I try to break things down, but having the altitude in the languaging I might use, it's to be in the observer. But I like how, it's to give that visual of, to create that space, and in that distance, you have greater clarity of seeing the forest or the trees, of seeing what's in front of you, that when you're so in it, it's hard to get that perspective. I once was working with an 11-year-old girl with a lot of anxiety, and she described the anxiety as being in the middle of a tornado, which again, I love visuals. And so I can visualize what that felt like for her viscerally and visually. And being in the middle of that tornado, she felt at complete whim of the direction, strength, speed, all of it, right? And so I said to her, look, let's not deny the tornado. The tornado's here. I'm not here to tell you, let's ignore or resist, ignore, resist, or deny the tornado. I said, let's see if you can be the weatherman commentating on the tornado. Just step outside of it and observe it and describe it and look at it. But the simple difference of being in the middle versus stepping outside of it, we're not ignoring what's arising. We're just shifting our relationship to it in a way that gives us some space. And with that space can give us choice or clarity or perspective.
Yeah, it's not the tornado.
It's
right?
not the tornado. It's our reaction to it.
It's how we relate to the tornado. Because we're all going to have moments that feel like what I'm calling recently I've been calling it like an existential washing machine, where I just feel like it's just, and taking new stuff in and it's like, holy crap, hit the pause button on this washing machine.
Yes.
And then it's like, okay, hold on. I got to expand. I got to get into that observer position here.
Yes.
And get curious.
Yes.
So
what did you do with that? How did you gain that ability to have the altitude, or the hitting the pause on the existential washing machine?
I have a lot of, I think, so in that kind of aha moment that I described in the childhood, but like after 12 hours after deciding to get divorced, I had that awareness. It was like, oh, you created all this because you were afraid. When I describe that experience, it's very hard for me to utilize language to actually put the gravity of what happened in that moment into words, because it was so powerful. It was like, for the first time, I was able to disconnect from the story of this human experience in the way that I was relating to it. So because of that perspective shift in that moment, I don't want to sound weird, but it shifted how I related to everything in life.
Yeah. No, I get it.
I didn't get as washed up in the emotions as I was, again, probably 11 hours and 59 minutes after the decision to get divorced. Like, I was in it. Like, I couldn't see out of it. I was full blown enmeshed with my emotional experience.
Yeah.
Fused with it. So the perspective shift helped, and it still does help because I still have been in the middle again and fused with my emotional experience. And the way I get through that now, and then journaling. I'm a big fan of just word vomit everywhere.
It's amazing how our hand has a different mind.
Yes.
Than our own mind cognitively has. Because there are times, and I'll prescribe this with my clients, just don't overthink it. Your hand will start going.
Yes, right. Surrender. But people don't want to sometimes acknowledge what the hand wants to write. You know, that's the hardest part, is naming it.
Yeah.
And that's why putting pen to paper is probably one of the most courageous things we can do on the healing journey.
Absolutely.
Because it's an acknowledgement. But I think, again, it's not even to create, like, for the sole purpose of just releasing. Like, don't put it that this has to be truth or it's just, you can't find the truth until you process your emotions. That's why I also love talk therapy, sisterhood. Like, I have my safe people who, when I just have all this emotional data coming up to the surface and I can't find clarity, I journal, I meditate, I do yoga, but most importantly, I talk to my friends or I talk to my mentors. I talk to my psychotherapist. Like, I'm like, hey, I need to move through this because I can't see out of it currently. And the only way I'm able to find some clarity or threads within the emotional world is by emotion, like processing through words, like using my voice, whether that's writing or speaking, really supports me in clearing.
Yeah.
And not making because I find that when we don't have those outlets, we get stuck in some not so great mental narratives that keep us in those same emotional mental loops that keep us stuck.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So how can we continually open those doors so we can provide more perspective, more altitude on the situation?
Yeah.
And I think shame keeps that box really small.
Oh, of course.
And fear does too. And so as soon as you can start to acknowledge the shame or fear or grief that's present in your experience, the faster you're going to be able to, at least in my experience, am able to move forward. Because then again, I'm relating to it instead of it having control over me. I'm not pushing it into my shadow. I'm like, hey, I see you. Like, you're not going to drive this car anymore, but I acknowledge you're here. And I'm curious, okay, what's coming up?
Well, and the beauty of what you're describing, there's actually scientific basis to back up, which there's studies that show that when we name what's arising, it calms the amygdala. And our amygdala is our emotional alarm in our brain. And it's so overly simplified. And when I teach this, people are like, really, that's it? It's like, yeah, kind of, almost. That's kind of all you have to do. Because when we name it, whether you're doing it through your verbal talk therapy or, with your girlfriends or your therapist or whatever that inner circle of safety looks like, where you have the safety to name it out loud, or even to yourself where you're not afraid of what you might say, right? Yes. Or getting that pen to paper, but literally naming it calms down the emotional reaction in our brain, because otherwise we're on the autopilot response. We're stuck in fight, flight, freeze. When we're stuck in fight, flight, freeze, and we have that threat of, I don't like this feeling, right? We get a physiological response. We feel it viscerally. We feel it in our body. And then we start to label, but it just naming it slows down that automatic process. So
yes,
what you're describing as a practice that just felt, this is what I need to do. I love that it's, this is what I love about this whole spiritual world, and kind of now Western science is backing up, just so we understand our brain and understand this is what's actually happening when we do this. So no wonder it's working.
Yeah. Clarity, certainty, right? You're giving some psychological certainty to your internal experience. And that's why expanding our emotional vocabulary is, I think, either step one or step two. Like, people need to expand their internal awareness and somatic awareness of their emotional experiences, but then also have the language to describe it adequately. Because I did not. And because I didn't have the language, it's very hard to connect the mind to the body.
Well, and we're never taught. We're not taught how to do this.
No.
And so you talk about the new generation, what's so beautiful, whether it be between social media, that we have greater access to these tools. I mean, I started off teaching mindfulness to kids at 3 and 4 years old. And the ability that they would have is so much closer to our inherent core of human beings. But we uncondition ourselves for what we are naturally conditioned to do. Right? I mean, it's out of fear. It's out of anxiety. I don't like that feeling. I want to push it down. Or you aren't raised in an environment where it's supported. I mean, that happens most of the time, is maybe even to a partner, a spouse, is you go to name your experience. Let's say you do have the emotional vocabulary. Yeah. Now the key is to have people around you who share the same vocabulary and who can share in that conversation with you.
I would agree. I think for me, I would not be where I am without my community and partner. And why I say that is almost to kind of full circle back to what you were saying, is like, if we don't have the tools or the awareness to co-regulate our nervous systems, we're not going to be able to move through the emotional blocks that we're experiencing in partnership or even in friendship.
Sure.
Because we need to be able to co-regulate our nervous systems in order to utilize our prefrontal cortex or our critical rational mind. Because if we're not, we're in that limbic system and we're just like repeat patterns over and over and over. So,
well, and then it's when people say, I don't understand. Why do I keep ending up in this situation over and over again? And then they externalize, oh, it's the other person. It's this job. It's this asshole I started dating again. Why do I always attract this? And there has to be a level of how am I contributing to this pattern by subconsciously recreating it?
Yeah.
So how did you finally, it's huge. And as we all are continuing to still grow and learn, you mentioned your partner. So how did you get to that point where you could say to yourself, I feel I can move forward in relationship and navigate, because I'm sure it's because you're human. Those old stories or old fears might pop up every now and then.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Are you kidding me? They still pop up. They're still alive and well, those old stories. But again, so how did I know I was ready? I didn't. I was just like, I made a commitment to myself to do the work necessary in order to move through the pain and at least find a foundation of myself. Really, I call it the journey home, to self, to emotions, to my boundaries, to my voice. And it's all fine and dandy when you're alone, like going on that journey, right? You're like, oh yeah, I got this. I got all of these concepts. I've, read all the books. I've done talk therapy. I've, visited shamans and here and there. So like, we're ready to rock, and I felt really confident in my level of awareness before entering into my relationship with Mark. But here's where things get dicey, is like, it's never the same when you're solo than when you get into relationship. That's where the real work really starts to come back on the line. Sure. And don't get me wrong, you hear a lot of this in the self-development world where it's, you got to love yourself and before, and it's like, not necessarily. Like, that's not how this whole rodeo works. Like, there's so many layers to the human experience. You learn through other relationships. So we often can't learn the things that we need most while we're alone. Exactly. You need to practice those skills, to test them out, to try it on, to learn new patterns of communication. Yeah. Right. It's like, it's one thing to know it. It's a different thing to integrate it and act it in relationship, because you learn those patterns in relationship, probably primary caregivers or in your family system. And they're going to be healed in relationship. Yeah. So I was super avoidant post-divorce. I was like, keep a safe distance. And I kind of...
So another word for that would be self-protective.
Yes, incredibly self-protective. I was, as Mark calls me, Miss Beyonce at that time period in my life, because I went from being extremely codependent. Like, and how, like in my previous relationship is like, I was dependent on a lot of different areas, from financial to emotional, on him to fill all of those boxes for me, which did not feel good in the long run, because it was like, I don't even know who I am, because I literally just lost my whole identity. Not that I knew who that identity was before, because I didn't, nor had that ever been a question that had been proposed to me. Is like, who are you and what do you want? I have no clue.
Yeah.
So after figuring out some of those, I was very protective of the person I had become, because I was like, one, I don't want to lose myself again in relationship. And because I don't want to get hurt again. Like, I don't want to experience that much pain. That sucked. But of course you have that on one hand, and then you have this other desire for love, companionship, and connection, where it's like, oh, I'm about to go so much deeper.
And sometimes those are at odds with one another.
I'd say that for most people, they're at odds all the time. You know?
Yes.
Unfortunately, because it's like that dance. It's like, okay,
it's a constant. Yeah.
Are we going to go in, or are we going to protect? And luckily, as you learn more skills and start to become aware of, attachment theory and how you relate in relationship, then you can have more space to navigate that together in partnership, instead of it being you versus me. It's like, okay, we see these patterns. How are we going to navigate this together? And how are we going to take this to a deeper level of connection and intimacy? So, I didn't know about attachment, emotional needs, any of that until I got into a relationship with Mark. Like, that wasn't something I was reading in my solo time. As a single person, I was like, which would have been great, but I didn't even know it existed, of course. So I was, after learning about attachment, that was very supportive for me. And not only just giving myself permission to have and be normalized in my experience in relationship, was that I need a little bit more space, because sometimes when there's too much closeness, I get overwhelmed. And with that awareness, I can relate to this in the dynamic of partnership and name it, but also be okay in expressing those needs.
And not have fear that you won't be accepted for those needs.
Yes. Well, and that's the growth on the other side as well, is because it will trigger his attachment style, because he does, and I'm just speaking in the context of my relationship, is like the avoidance triggers the anxious, and then it's like, it creates the cycle, and it's like, okay, let's start to see a little bit beyond this pattern of anxious avoidance stance. So we've been working on that for 3.5 years. Like, it's a constant, because there's deeper layers of healing. And for me, in kind of coming into Earn Secure, was reconnecting to my clean anger, is like actually reconnecting to my fire. And I don't mean that in like aggression, shaming, blaming, and destructing other people's personal boundaries, but I mean that in a very deep, visceral sense of giving myself permission to actually have a voice and stand up for myself, like have a backbone, because I didn't. Like, anger, I learned at a very young age, was something that you should completely disconnect from, deny, and not ever allow into your experience, because it wasn't safe. So that has been a big part of my process in the container of our relationship, is giving myself permission to utilize my voice, to talk about my frustrations, to engage in conflict in a clean and kind way, of course.
Of course.
And then, there's also been this beautiful element of recreating what relationship or partnership looks like. I don't have a model of the relationship I'm living with Mark, and that's terrifying.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? Like, nobody's and I'm not saying that we are on the cutting edge of modeling of relationship, because we're definitely not, but I'm saying there's like, I've never been where I am now.
Yeah.
And I've never seen anybody else go where I've been. And yes, I do.
We're so much alike. I there's like just so much I want to just jump in and be like, oh my God, me too.
Tell me.
I'm at. Well, I just want to let you're not alone. Like, and I hope that through the work that you guys are doing, and, you know, John and I are trying to put out into the world, and just to authentically live this experience of two aware people who have a desire for greater growth, connection, intimacy, communication, vulnerability.
Yeah.
Allowing all the emotional range, and to not let it be a threat to the relationship or a threat to our own identities. And just like you had said, when I first met John, and we've also been together 3.5 years, and I was after my divorce, and I had been doing my work and my growth and my spirituality and my practice. One of the very first things I said to him was, I'm afraid of losing myself in relationship. Because I was lost in relationship, being with my ex since I was 13. I was with him for 23 years. I didn't know who I was, not defined by my relationship. And I was damned at this point in my life. When we met, I was 37. I don't want to be just a glob, right? Like this enmeshment ball.
Yeah.
And I was very clear in naming that need. And yet, as we've gotten closer, there is a natural enmeshment. So there's a natural push and pull of, well, what does that look like? And we both have the self-awareness to notice when old patterns come up. While they might first come out as like a blah, like I'm just feeling this, right? We then have the awareness to say, let's be curious about that story. And you begin to say, oh, look at that. Look how just my past is showing up in the present. This is an old story. It's an old narrative. It's an old habit. It's an old pattern. Is this really what's happening right now? Or are we just reacting to an old familiar way of being? So let's separate out the past from what's actually happening in between the two of us.
Yeah. It's so beautiful.
And I just got back a week ago from traveling a month in Europe. And I was not with him. And I was with my daughters for almost all of it.
Yeah.
And I was with my ex-husband for part of it. And it was a trip based around my daughter's bat mitzvah in Israel.
Incredible.
And so it was very appropriate to be with my ex-husband as co-parents for our daughter. But it was very unsettling for the attachment style of John.
Yeah.
So we've been navigating this anxious attachment, my secure attachment that was getting triggered to become a little bit more anxious. As, you know, fear of abandonment was my story, which is why I think I stayed connected to my ex for so long, because that fear of abandonment story ruled my decision making.
Of course.
So just this idea of what you're sharing of this, there's no model for what this looks like, to be aware and not be afraid to enter into the conversation of this is scary and it feels messy at times. And can we hold the space and contain both of our narrative, both of our past, both of our spiritual work, and use that as a tool for growth? Because I look at it as we're growing through this. So we have, you know, we're committed. There's no other choice for us than to be in relationship. And so we get to use this as a tool for growth, to let go of those old stories, those old pains, those old insecurities, the attachment styles from our childhood or our exes, to say, let's let this be a new pathway. And then ideally in a, you know, let's go teach others how to do this. Let's role model this to others.
Yeah. Well, and you are. Because
it's possible.
Right.
It's not easy. Right? It's scary as all hell.
Oh.
And
it's the most terrifying.
It forces you to enter into, wow, these are really deep fears. These are really deep insecurities. These are really old stories. And look how pervasive they are, even when I thought I did my work, right? Because even when we've done it, we're not done.
Right. And I think that's why we're being called to do it on this deep, very deep level. Like, it is viscerally, like, sometimes unnameable.
Yeah.
And that's the part where you have to really, like you're saying, is is can we expand this container for it all to be here?
Yeah.
And I love what you're saying. And I think it's vitally important. And that is the commitment in the relationship is like, no matter what comes up, we are committed to moving through this.
Yeah.
You know what I have found too, and I'm curious about your experience with this, is I idealized my solo time because I was living in just complete surrender, like with spirituality and just like flow and like magic everywhere. And I was very afraid to lose that, which of course in relationship, I did to some extent, like separate from all of that magic and the idealized of that solo life because, you know, there's work to be done. But now I'm looking at how do we integrate that together in the relationship where it's more of this surrender, this flow. And I think in order to get there, you can't not go through all of these attachment wounds and all of these insecurities because I mean, it's driving all of that to the surface, right? Because there's all of these needs of one, security and safety, but it's even so much more than that. It's almost connection to self, but also connection to self in the container of relationship.
Absolutely.
While alignment and connection to self. And the only way I've ever seen that be expressed in my personal experience is with truth. I have to name everything I don't want to name or have never wanted to name in my whole life, including the deep fears that are incredibly destabilizing and terrifying.
Sure.
And it's like, well, if I don't name it, it's going to blow something else up. So I might as well just bring it all to the table.
Right. Well, and there's that fear that if I name it, it's going to get bigger, when in fact, it actually is what makes it smaller.
Exactly.
Because we're giving it room to exist.
Oh, can we just scream that louder for everybody on the planet? Because there's so much fear around naming stuff right now.
And you know where I see it so much and is when parents don't want to acknowledge their kid's emotion for fear that they're giving into the child's temper tantrum or the anger or the sadness. So especially when we love someone so much, we see them in pain. We just want to say, oh, you're going to be okay. It's okay. Calm down.
Yeah.
The last thing anyone's ever going to do when you say calm down is to actually calm down. But what will help that person calm down is to say, wow, I see you're really in a lot of pain right now. This is really hard for you. You're really struggling in this. This is really hard for you to manage this, you know, mean girl at school or having to go to your dad's for the weekend or this, you know, rejection of this friend. It's not making it bigger by speaking directly to it. It's then when the other person can say, oh, thank you. I finally feel heard and seen and validated. And that's what calms down that emotional pain. Because we all, whether we're a child, whether we're a partner, we all just want to feel seen, heard, and validated.
Yeah, and I would say that that's one of the biggest roles a parent can hold for a child. I'm not a parent, so I can't.
But yet we can do the same thing for our partners.
Right. It's regulating the nervous system by having the emotional intelligence to name and acknowledge.
To give it the space to exist.
Let it be there, but you have to be with your own emotions before you can create space for somebody else.
Right. And and I want to go back to one thing you said, so I think it's so important, is how to maintain some of this individuality in relationship without that being a threat to the relationship or to feel like, can I stay connected if I still need some solo time?
Yeah, and that's a dance in every relationship.
Yeah.
This is what I need in order to be at my best. And luckily, these are all very important conversations. Like, and that it's just like the foundation of my relationship with Mark is he has always expressed to me, I never want you to do something, one, you don't want to do, two, that disconnects you from your true self. Like you're like, I have so much respect for you and your path that I need you to own. And so a lot of it is old stuff of like your codependent pattern. Like, and so a lot of that is my work of like bringing all of me to the table and actually being able to acknowledge my needs for solo time without me thinking that it's going to cause emotional pain or whatever for the other side, because that's actually just my story. And it's like, no, you need to get clear in what you need in order to be at your best. And also the same on the other side of the relationship. And we model that for each other. Yeah. Because have so much respect for each other's emotional well-being, but also spiritual path. Yeah. It's an ongoing journey. It really is. And I think that's the fear sometimes of, like I said, of can't we just be done yet? No.
And the more open you are, you get different layers to it. And I think that's a beautiful thing too.
I agree 100% with you. And I think right now on the planet there's a bigger invitation for all of us that are doing this work. Like, we are really in it and coming face to face with a lot of old stuff that just needs to be processed and integrated and moved through so that we can create this new foundation that hopefully is built upon mutuality, respect, compassion, like more of this element of community, but connection.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost pushing us into like, hey, remember, you're all a part of this human species. Like, it's time to get humble. It's time to refocus our energies on actually what matters, which is connection.
It's huge. You know, this is unusual for me, but since February, I've been in 7 countries.
Wow.
I was in Costa Rica, and then I was in Ecuador in the middle of the Amazon jungle in April, where I was with no Wi-Fi, no cell service, like literally in the middle of the Amazon jungle, immersing into the Quechua culture in these small villages, to then just being in Europe for a month, you know, all the way from, you know, Zurich and Paris and Israel and Italy. Like, so my world view literally in the past 6 months has been knocked wide open to, if we were ever connected, I get it. Like, this world is connected. I've been to all parts of it and have experienced people all over the world, and we're all the same. We're all dealing with the same emotional struggles, environmental problems, relationship issues, self-worth issues. What am I going to eat for lunch? Is it healthy? You know, like
totally.
This interconnectivity is something I've never quite gotten as much as I've gotten out of this travel. And it's huge. And we need to keep that in mind, because even understand that common humanity when we're stuck, like the struggles that you mentioned in the beginning, to tap into that common humanity of, I'm not alone in this struggle. It feels like I am, but I'm really not, which is such a key for self-compassion practice, is acknowledging I am unique, though my problems are not unique. And that can connect us with others, even just internally, to know I'm not alone. I'm not the first person who has felt lost or scared or abandoned or in, you know, not in alignment, or existential washing machine spiraling cycles.
Totally right. I love what you said, and I tell everyone the power of travel, of solo travel, of travel, whatever. Get out and see the world, because our perspective is way too, like,
talk about altitude.
Seriously, but like you're saying, like in Peru, Costa Rica, or the Amazon, like, you are, every single time we step outside of our perceptual, I guess, box that we live in, we expand not only our emotional intelligence, but how we relate to humanity as a whole, like tenfold. It is the greatest gift anybody can give themselves. Is go travel and see the world.
Yes. And then get really still and just sit still and be quiet.
And I actually think it's one of the main reasons I'm on this planet is this element of humanizing this human experience, of really bringing it back down to, like, we are all way more similar than we are different. And as soon as we start to realize that and can drop our, I don't know, ideologies, drop the dogma, the conditioning, all of the boxes that we try to fit ourselves in order to be loved, and can really give ourselves permission to start sharing our stories and our struggles and whatever, you know, the good, the bad, all of it. And then do that in community and be really committed in that community. Yeah. Like, that's what I'm trying to create. I want more community. And I'm not even just talking about, like, on a macro level. I'm talking about micro. Like, I want my neighbors to know that I'm fully supported by my neighbors. I want the systems to change from the inside out. Like, so I don't know how we do it, but we're doing it.
You're already doing it. And, you know, I think part of it is sharing your story, sharing your truths, and hope that someone says, oh my God, she's speaking to me, right? I mean, look at you and I, like, I feel so much alignment in our experience, and they're totally different. And yet almost identical, right? And
yeah, I love it.
If more people were willing to get really honest and to share their vulnerability, we would have so much deeper connection, whether it's with the community or with our partners, right? Because when you come back to relationship, people are scared to share and get vulnerable. And it's a fear of, how is this going to be received? How am I going to be viewed? Am I going to be judged? And it keeps us really quiet. And it also is what keeps us really stuck. But it's also a good litmus test. If you don't get received, then maybe you're not with the right person.
Exactly. Like they have to, like Brene Brown says, they have to earn your truth. They have to earn your story.
When I first started dating after my divorce, I purposefully would, if I was out to dinner or out for drinks, I would purposefully text or call my kids goodnight in the middle of the date as a test to see how it was received. Because if some guy was not going to support me being the mom who I am, who I strive and always want to be, not my person. So if I was ever judged, like, I can't believe you're calling your daughter in the middle of a date. Yes, I am, because it's time to say goodnight.
Absolutely.
That was me in alignment. And we all have our own little litmus test of what does being in alignment look like? And do we have the courage to do it for fear of someone may not be receiving us?
Right. That's like choosing yourself over self-abandonment. And let me tell you, there's nothing more painful than self-abandonment. So yeah.
Oh my God, Kylie, I feel like you and I could talk forever. We'll have to have another conversation.
Yeah, I look forward to many.
I really do too. It's so refreshing to find such authenticity and simplicity around speaking our truth. So thank you for doing the work that you're doing, sharing your story, your gifts, your tools, your experience, because I absolutely know you are helping others feel what you wish you had at 20 years old. And that's why we get called to do this, right?
I agree 100%. And thank you so much for creating this container to have this awesome conversation.
Thank you.
Hope your community enjoys it, and I look forward to sharing it with mine, and deeply acknowledge you for choosing courage and alignment over everything.
Cheers to that, and right back at you. And for those who want to find Kylie, she Bing is beautiful and on Instagram, and I know you do courses. So I mean, there's so many things that people can do to check you out, and we'll definitely have access to that in the show notes so people can find you. And yeah, we need to keep talking. This is too fun for me. I love enlightened conversations with people because it feeds my soul. So thank you for indulging me and my soul needs and sharing your time with me today.
Honored.
Take care.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.